All right. Now you might have to bear with me. I'm having technical difficulties, but hopefully this live stream will go smooth. I won't be too long, or at least I'll try not to be so long. But I wanted to just hop on here and sort of explain myself, sort of summarize the things I've been talking about here as far as history on this channel. And I want to focus on the transatlantic slave trade. See the title, the transatlantic slave trade lie, and that the numbers, I believe the numbers are grossly inflated. And the primary reason they're so inflated is to suggest that we are not native to this land. I believe it was their way to try to explain or convince us, deceive us, and make us believe that we were all brought from Africa. I don't believe it. And that's okay. Now, a lot of people, they get mad when I draw my own conclusions. They'll leave hate comments on my channel and say, hey, you're no genius. You're no historian. Your conclusions are flawed. You don't know what you're talking about. Okay, fine. If you think I'm some type of lunatic, that's okay. Hey, I'm at peace with the fact that what I believe doesn't correlate with mainstream. And the thing is, we're free to do that. As students, we're free to do that. We can look at the information, we can compare information, and we can draw our own conclusions. That's why you have several established professional historians who disagree. You find historians with different views of different aspects of history because it's not mathematics. You know, it's based on what the evidence suggests and what makes the most sense. This makes the most sense to me. It just does not make sense to me that a handful of white men, 5, 6 white men, were able to pack 600, 500, 300 black people on a big flipping ship and haul them over here to make 52,000 trips in those days from the United States to Africa and back. 52,000 trips. I just don't believe it. It sounds ridiculous. And you know, I don't know why it's so offensive to some people. When we listen to say Chinese people, Japanese people, people of Laos or wherever, anywhere in the world, when we listen to those people tell their history, it doesn't bother me. They will talk about how their ancestors were the most advanced, were brilliant people. They'll talk about all the accomplishments of their ancestors. It doesn't bother me. And I don't know why, you know, talking about what our ancestors did bothers so many people. But some people, if you dare attach yourself to any positive accomplishment, it's like they take offense to it and they say that it's not even possible that your ancestors did any of that. And they will say, hey, it was somebody else other than you. I haven't figured that out yet, but there's a crowd of people who are like that, who just say, hey, anything positive, any accomplishment that you cite in your history, no way. That's pseudoscience. Well, I view mainstream history as pseudoscience, especially stuff like this. I mean, if there's a handful of men with guns and there are hundreds of us, and they're talking about sailing a boat across the ocean and they want to enslave us, guess what? We fighting. We're going to force you to use those bullets. I'm sorry, but when you have so many people, your guns are irrelevant. They didn't have the type of guns back. They didn't have AR-15s, semi-automatic weapons. No, I believe that would not even have happened. And you have people who are having their whole families taken, captured, enslaved. Do you know how much they would have to cooperate? Convince their kids to relax, stay calm? Keep in mind, they claim that on these slave ships, the center portion was for kids. I don't believe that. When people are faced with things like that, they're going to revolt. They're going to put their life on the line to fight back. You're going to go through hell to even make one trip like this. So to say that there were 50,000, 52,000 over a couple hundred years, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. Over 54,000 voyages. Okay? And you got to keep in mind, too, the Middle Ages, the 1400s, the 1500s, 1600s, well, mainly the 1500s and 1600s, and the late 1400s. That was an era of mass deception and lies, forgeries, and just making stuff up. Mass forgeries and lies, where history was literally made up. Lies were part of the program. It was standard. It was expected for people to lie. I shared some of the information. People can always do their own research. Let me share my screen here. And this is just one out of many examples. You can do your own research on this. All historians know that the Middle Ages was a time of mass forgeries, deception, rewriting history, so on and so forth. And it was orchestrated by the church. Just like slavery, the church was involved in that. The forged texts of the Middle Ages and why Europe's holy men turned to counterfeiting. The monks, they were basically instructed to forge. And it took place on a massive scale. Now, look, you all can believe what you want to believe. If y'all want to believe this all took place, knock yourself out. I can't believe it. Now, look at Jamestown, 1619. They say Jamestown, Virginia, about 20 captive Africans are sold into slavery in the Americas. Okay, 20 slaves. There's your first 20 black people in this land. You telling me the population we're looking at now came from 20 slaves? Isn't there a high chance of inbreeding, incest, when you only got 20 people? They want me to believe, y'all want us to believe, that we started with 20 little old people, and they just started to have sex, have kids. None of those kids would commit incest. What is this? It sounds like a fairy tale to me. I'm sorry. I don't believe this. It sounds ridiculous. That these 20 black people are the first African Americans. Okay. If you say so. But to me, this sounds ridiculous. And how many sources make this claim? Oh, you had about 20 or 50, right? And then by the 1700s, you had a whole massive population of black people. And it all started from people being taken from Africa. Look at the claims here. They say at the peak of the slave trade, there was on average some 78,000 people brought from Africa to the Americas. 78,000 a year. According to this source, this is Britannica. I'm not buying it. These are grossly inflated numbers. And just like the initial attempts to colonize the New World failed multiple times, I believe something this extraordinary would have failed as well. I don't believe it. I'm not buying it. They came over here and enslaved the natives. The people who were already here. This is what I believe. And that was us. We were already here. It's already documented that Christopher Columbus did indeed attack and enslave the native people that he found here. I'm not buying this idea that those native people were not the black people we're looking at today. Not buying it. I've explained in multiple videos why I don't believe this, right? But a lot of people, they're not buying it. A lot of black Americans, they just can't believe it. They can't believe it. And especially a lot of foreigners, they just can't believe it. They can't wrap their head around something like that. But let me ask you this. Does it sound reasonable to you for an entire population, a civilization? You know, if you have enough people where you build an entire civilization, you got cities. Is it reasonable to believe that entire populations like that would just disappear? I can't think of any population of people who simply disappeared. Now, the Tasmanians were killed off. That was a small island and a specific people. But we don't have no record of any mass extermination here in the Americas. So why should we believe that the black people that were here disappeared? I don't understand that. Let me be specific. I don't understand why people believe the Olmecs simply disappeared. In order to not believe that we were here, you have to believe that the Olmecs disappeared and that we magically appeared here some other way. I don't get that. Now, what you see on the screen is an example that I'm using. The ancient Egyptians did not simply disappear. They did not vanish. They migrated into other parts of Africa. Into Africa because the foreigners that were invading Egypt, they didn't migrate in that direction. They migrated in the opposite direction of where the foreigners were coming. And there are too many parallels. There's too much evidence that proves that the people around Egypt, in the Sudan, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Uganda, all over Africa, you find too many powerful similarities that has convinced me. You don't have to believe it. It has convinced me that the Egyptians, the original Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians, did not simply vanish. They did not disappear. They were not exterminated. They got out of there. Non-stop migrations over long periods of time. You're talking about a civilization that was off to themselves with no invasions for thousands of years. The incursion of, or the arrival of foreigners, invaders, conquerors would have been unacceptable for a people who had lived and existed by themselves for so long. They wouldn't have tolerated foreign rule, foreign culture. So they left. They migrated. And you see the evidence all over Africa. You see too many similarities between the ancient Egyptians and the present people of Africa all over. Right? This is a video I made a very long time ago. I also mentioned how unlikely is it that these people wouldn't be related to the tribe of Akhenaten, where people who've never met just happen to practice skull elongating. I don't buy that. I don't buy it. The evidence suggests to me that the people of ancient Egypt migrated. They got out of there and went into different parts of the world, of Africa, and other parts of the world. They went all over the world, period, in my opinion. And it would be ridiculous to assume that they simply disappeared. And I think it's also ridiculous to assume that the original Americans simply disappeared, that the Olmecs simply disappeared. I'm not buying that. Now, when you look at the map of Africa, the Egyptians were dealing with foreigners coming from this direction. So they would migrate in any other direction. Right? South, southeast, west, southwest. Getting away from these foreigners invading their ancient land. Just like I believe in the Americas, they originated down in South America. And when they were invaded, more people migrated north. I've talked about, a lot of people have talked about how it's undeniable that the Egyptians came from the south, because the south is the only area where you find evidence of architectural development, building development. You see a bunch of, there's over 200 pyramids in the Sudan alone. Hundreds of pyramids all along the Nile. You find hundreds of smaller pyramids only in the south. If the Egyptians came, the original Egyptians came from some other part of the world, then you would see a trail of pyramids from some other part of the world. You don't see that. This is the single strongest evidence that the Egyptians were nothing but Nubians, Sudanese people who migrated from the south up to the north. It's real simple. And when they were invaded, they went back in the directions they came from. In the Americas, I believe it's no different. You had people who, once the foreigners arrived, they hauled ass up north and south. They left the civilizations in Middle America. And that is how they ended up here in the North. But that migration started with the Red Indian invasion. So by the time Europeans came here, those migrations from the South to the North had already taken place. They may have been somewhat exaggerated, but they had already been here in the United States by then, in the South, staying as close as possible to the warm climate, the tropical climate. Also, like I pointed out, look at how bizarre and crazy it would be for explorers to explore the world. They figured out how to sail. Like, wow, we got boats, we got a compass, we know how to sail, let's travel the world. And they sail out here and they find people in all these flipping islands. Right? This is literally what happened. They went sailing and it blew their mind, had to blow their mind. Like, how did these people get out here? Explorer went out here, found people in all these islands. How could they possibly be in all these islands and not also be in the Americas? It's literally impossible for black people to have not been here in the Americas, just like they were here in all of these flipping islands eons ago, very long time ago. And like I said, it's pretty ridiculous to argue that they were not when you have actual civilization, ancient ruins here in the Americas. You got ancient ruins. You got artifacts. Look like they came straight from Africa. Just Google old African sculptures. You can't distinguish them from the oldest sculptures found here in the Americas. You got actual civilizations. You know, if you want to know if humans, you explore some part of the world and you want to find out if humans ever lived there, if there was somebody there before you, the best piece of evidence is to find a flipping civilization, ancient ruins. As soon as you find an ancient city, there's your evidence. Yeah, somebody beat me here. So why do we think it's any different for the Americas? We have found ancient ruins here. But yet we assume those ancient people magically disappeared and we just reappeared somehow, some way. I'm not buying that. That don't make no sense. That just don't make no sense to me. And when you look at these artifacts, now look, if you believe that these people were something other than black, hey, good for you, knock yourself out. I don't care. I don't care what other people think. I don't know why people care so much about what I think. To the point where they leave, where they want to insult me for sharing what I think. You can share what you think. You think they were Red Indians? You think they were Europeans? Okay. It's on you to provide the evidence. This is what I believe, and this is the evidence I'm providing. If it bothers you, that just tells me that you don't, you have some doubts about what you claim to believe. So I think it's laughable to speculate that the Olmecs disappeared, vanished into thin air, magically, that there are no descendants of these people who built the civilization here in the Americas, that the people who built these civilizations, which had to have developed over many thousands of years, people had to have been here for an extremely long time for there to be ancient civilization. You actually have flipping pyramid complexes. Do you know how long people had to have been here? Yet I'm supposed to believe that all of those people magically disappeared, and today you don't have any of their descendants. And the explanation for the black people that are here is that they were all brought over here from Africa, starting with 20 people, 54,000 voyages, back when a time where the economy, literally couldn't afford to do nothing like that. And if they could, what they need slaves for? They got that much resources? Not buying it. Not buying it, man. It sounds like a flipping fairy tale, just like a lot of other aspects of history. You look at them, you research it, it sounds ridiculous, and it usually turns out to be a lie. An absolute lie. Here's where the BBC said, yeah, slave ships carried anywhere from 250 to 600 slaves at a time. 600 people? That's so many people, you can't even picture what the crowd of people look like in your mind. And you telling me a handful of white men with guns had complete power? I'm not buying that. And forced all them? No, that would have been too dangerous. Even with guns, I wouldn't feel comfortable about trying to dominate 600 people. Like, nah, I don't think so. We're going to need at least 300 to deal with that 600. And they hauled all the food, put all the food on the ships. They had to feed them. The voyage took weeks. You can't just have weeks they're not eating nothing. Y'all brought all that food with you to Africa, arrived, had plenty of food for you and 600 people over many weeks. You did this 54,000 times? Shut up. I ain't buying that. That sound insulting. That sound insulting to me. No, these people had guns and they came over here and pointed them at the people they found over here. That's what I believe. And then told those people, we brought you over here from Africa. Now, I'm not saying that there were no people brought from Africa, but I believe it was minuscule. They may have made an attempt or whatever, but I believe the people you see here today are the people who are native to this land. When I say that we are Native Americans, that don't mean Indian. I heard somebody in a Twitter space, I think yesterday, say that Black Americans claiming to be Indians. No, we're not. These people are just, as soon as they hear Native American, they automatically think Indian. No, Native American is whoever is native. Whoever's there first. That's all it means. Don't mean no that you're no Indian. And I don't claim to be no Indian. And I'm not talking about Indians. Right? I believe we are the native people of this land. And the evidence, in my opinion, is too overwhelming. And this document, I think, knocks it out the park, puts icing on the cake. Here they found the skull of an African woman who lived some 11,500 years ago in the Americas. They don't know how old those ruins are. It's probably the human remains, most likely a lot older than that. And what else did they say? He believed the skull, which had been found in a 13-meter deep cavern in the Brazilian state of Minas, Gerais, showed negroid features rather than the mongoloid features typical of Brazil's Indians. This Japanese scientist made a clear distinction between black people and the red Indians. He said these remains are not the remains of a red Indian people. This is Negro remains. This is a Negro skull. And this Japanese scientist said that, said that the first people here were Negroids, black people. And until I come across convincing evidence that this had to have been a massive population of people, had to have been, somebody's going to have to explain to me how these people simply vanished into thin air and was magically replaced 100% by red Indians. And somehow the only black people, well, all the black people that you see here today originated from about 20 black people from around 200-300 years ago. I don't think so. So if you need more clarification into what I'm talking about, simply listen to the previous series of videos that I did on this subject. Right? Shout out to Moochie in the building. That is all for this live stream, and I will see you all on the next.